rock and roll. Let's move the mic a bit closer to close up the gap. All right. We'll have some intro music. Why does it do that all the time? I'm gonna mute myself. I quite like that track. Now let me just switch around with a. Oh no, the mouse is frozen. No. Come on, mouse. Right. This might be a bit of a clunky stream, and it's a bit of an awkward one. So I've got a script yet again. Saves me having to waffle. So looking for potential can make you not see a person for who they are. Now, these are just some thoughts in regards to trying to like motivate and shape someone else's life. And in these circles, we see a lot of this happening. You know, mantras, tenets, principles to adhere to, rites of passage, gatekeeping. It comes in sort of different forms. Preaching, you know, dictating. And if not very aware, could result in stripping away a person's autonomy with contradictions of somehow telling them at the same time that they are free to choose for themselves. You know, it's like, do as I say, but it's up to you if you want to do it. And yeah, it's easy for us to not be aware that we might actually be a bit lecturing at times. And maybe we might assume it's something this person we're trying to help wants, or it's something that's good for them. We are taking over their life by accident. Maybe have you ever experienced this? Has someone else's expectations been more important than you yourself as a person? Do you feel a little bit pushed aside? And maybe with what we'll be discussing, we'll be able to, or if you happen to be this sort of person, you'll be able to articulate and state what it is you actually want without having to compromise your integrity. And together in that kind of relationship dynamic of sort of like teacher and student, a much more honest and open relationship can then take place, and both sides can benefit from it. So in effect, the discussion can help those who wish to impart their advice, their life lessons, their experiences, to hone it in a more productive way that actually helps the person, rather than erasing them, and you're doing it maybe for your own, I don't want to have to say selfish, but it could end up being like that, but for your own prerogative, shall we say. So there's going to be a disclaimer here, because this is a stream about discernment largely, and that is always going to be a tricky area of knowing where do you find the balance, and it takes someone with a mature, experienced sort of mind to be able to make those executive type decisions. So you can't just follow a set formula or a guideline and think you'll avoid any obstacles or problems and everything's going to be cool. Sometimes you might need to break the rules, and that's part of what discernment is dealing with. So a disclaimer. So I know a lot of this advice we hear, things like tenets and principles, is sound advice. It's tried and tested. It's got many people who've experienced the same sort of thing, and to a very large degree, it is necessary to help guide people who need this guidance, who are a bit lost, who are young particularly, or inexperienced. The naive and gullible, for instance. Sometimes you need to sort of take them by the hand. So in no way am I trying to discourage anyone from giving advice or sharing their examples or experiences. It is still mighty important that this continues. So just try to remember that as we go through, because I might sound as though I'm saying to step back, or who are you to tell people what to do. I'm just trying to illustrate how much of a responsibility you have when you try to guide someone, because it's going to affect the rest of their life. And so one of the other emphasis here is, or what I'm trying to illustrate is, when we do these sort of things, we must be cautious that we're not things aren't going over an edge, or we're stepping out of bounds. And an example of this could easily be seen where things are going like nuts is how feminism traumatizes women into jumping onto the victimhood bandwagon. And that's not helping the individual woman out at all. And you can see how self-serving it is of feminists to want to do that to their so-called lessers, who they're apparently trying to help, but really they're just making it worse for them. And there are plenty of other social justice groups that do this sort of thing, where they're telling you and not advising you what you should be doing. So a distinction. And these higher ups, or these, I mean, you can call them by many names, the wise one, the guru, the mentor, the teacher, the elder, whoever, the parent, and that kind of way of looking at it, it might be an easier way for us to conceptualize this concept here, by looking at the parent-child dynamic, because parents often do this thing. They often step over the line, and they will call it perhaps their legacy. So kids living as an extension of the parent and not as their own individual person with their own life. And that is one of the areas I'm trying to describe here, where, as good intended someone may be with being a mentor or teacher or parent, beware that you're not trying to live vicariously through your children, because it denies them having their own life. And I think that's pretty bad when children are expected to carry a legacy that they had no choosing or no say in the matter. So as much as we might want to see people reach their potential, we can see that there's something they are capable of. It is very tempting to start seeing them as their potential. That is seeing someone, essentially, who does not even exist yet. And you're not really seeing them as a person in that moment, nor are you accepting them for who they really are. If you want them to improve, let alone reach potential, you need to accept them right now, where they're at, even if you don't like it currently. That potential needs a frame of reference. Otherwise, the potential has no value. It means nothing. Yeah, they might be more successful eventually, but taken for granted, it could easily be passed off as a given and not really worth acknowledging. If you can remind yourself where they are at right now, the appreciation of knowing where it is they came from and how far they've come, overcoming all these tidal waves of challenges, will increase. It makes for a much more satisfying delayed gratification. Before even going for potential, it can then have substance backing, like behind it, backing it up, which makes potential that much more desirable, much more appealing, much more. It gives it much more motivation to go for it if there is meaning behind why it is you want them, or trying to encourage them to reach this potential. In some ways, that's kind of like it does the work for you. You don't really need to do much, because they've already got that motivation. You're just guiding them to reach the potential. You're not doing the work for them. So potential can be looked at as something inspiring. It's conquering false beliefs, usually, or some form of resistance. And by accepting who they are right now, tells them that they have what it takes to reach for that potential, whatever it may be, and that you have confidence in them. That is quite a powerful motivator, rather than trying to force them into your vision. It will be much more of their own choosing and a decision on their part to do it for themselves, independent of you. It's their ambition, their life, not yours. If you don't accept them, how are they supposed to reach this potential? What do they have to work with? What desire would they have? If they do elevate, would you then turn around and say, for example, like, that was thanks to you? Or would it be better to be praising them and saying, like, well done for doing it? So in this way, you are not becoming a source of their self-esteem, which is a crucial thing here, because you don't want to encourage someone to reach for a potential and at the same time you turn them into a dependent upon you. You want them to be able to have self-sustaining qualities, that they can stand on their own 2 feet. Think back to a parent and a child. You want to see your children grow so that they can do things for themselves. You don't want to carry on having to parent them as they get older. And if you make them, if this becomes, a mistake, and you do screw this up a little bit, what will end up happening is you erase them in the process, and they are now placed in your imagination as a shadow of what the potential they could be. So you can instead stay within your boundaries and nurture what esteem they may have. That is where, so you're not trying to replace their self-esteem, you're trying to build up what they've got. A cheerleader, for example, doesn't actually do the work of scoring a goal. Now, you might not like the idea of you being a cheerleader, but essentially that's the position, that's the role you're going to be playing. You're going to be rooting for the players to score the goal. So remember that one. A cheerleader doesn't actually do the work of scoring a goal. And by doing this, and with them making the connections for themselves, will make reaching that potential much more possible because they're on board with the idea of it. Nagging at them is not giving them the power. Trusting them is. You need to trust them, not nag them. So comparing your world to someone else's doesn't mean you have to understand what their world means to them. You don't necessarily need to understand theirs. Sorry, I think I read that wrong way. Comparing your world to someone else's doesn't mean you understand what theirs mean to them. Comparing only serves to establish a relatable connection. This means whatever potential you envision is up against the framework of the other person's inner world rules. And by inner world rules, there's I've forgotten the particular phrasing, but if you watch a movie, particularly if it's like a fantasy movie, there are rules in that movie that need to be established, and then you can project yourself within the storyline, working in the mechanics of that fantasy landscape that's being in that media. Now, there's a particular term for it, but I can't remember what it's called. But essentially, so if you get what I'm saying, is your vision isn't the same as what that person's perspective, the rules inside their inner world, how that operates and functions. So essentially, I can't just say, hey, do this, because in my world, that works. It might not work in your world. So you see how there's that expectation and there'll be a disappointment, because if I'm not understanding how your world works, how can I then impose the rules of my world into there and say, hey, if you just do this and that, no problem, you'll have it sorted out. The problems they describe to you, if they're explaining themselves to you, might seem trivial, but from their point of view, inside their head, with their inner world, their rules, they could be facing a monster. And if you're there just saying that's no biggie, you're not really being sympathetic to their needs and perspective, and so it'll be that much more harder for you to be of an asset in terms of helping them reach their potential, because you're not seeing them or appreciating where it is they're coming from. And this world jumping, their inner world and your inner world jumping into each other's heads, it works both ways. So not only may you be trying to jump into their world and take over it, but they may be trying to jump into yours as a form of escape. They might look to you in a bit of envy or jealousy or something along those sort of lines. And so if that was the case, someone may want you to see them and understand them as a way of bringing you into their world so that they're not alone in this struggle. And there we see a problem of the boundaries again, where not only might they become a dependent, but if you facilitate their dependency, now you've been sucked into their world. Now it's going to be harder for you to, for example, exit, because maybe you might feel a lot of sympathy or compassion, and you feel like they depend on you so much that you need to be there as their caretaker. For example, the narcissist would do this. They would suck you into their narcissistic world and prevent you from leaving. and which, however which way they can, guilt you, shame you, whatever, bribe you maybe. So that's another caution there for teacher, student, or parent and child, is like children will do that. They'll continually want their parents to look out to do their parental role, and if parents don't step back and say, "Hey, kid, you're old enough now. I have every faith and confidence in your abilities, and I trust you will make the right decisions. And even if you mess up, as part of life, it's time for you to leave the nest and do your own thing." Kids will be anxious and not like that idea, but it needs to take place. And so the parent might hurt the parent to some degree, because they still want there's that part of them that still wants to look after their child, but that separation is a tough one, and the parent needs to be able to restrain themselves from interjecting into the child's life unnecessarily. Maybe if things are desperately severe, they might have to, and okay, fine, but both sides need to learn at a certain point. Both sides need to be able to step back, and that principle, extrapolate that into the community spaces with these tenets and these rules and these stoic lessons being imparted. At some point, you don't need to be spoon-fed anymore. You should have known enough by now. Like, haven't you had enough red pills by now? How many more do you need? You're now hooked on them. Go away and deal with it yourself. And I mean that with a compassion. So there needs to be a respect of these inner worlds that we have, our perspectives in life. We all have our own experiences. And this makes things like empathy a little bit of a misconception, because to say that you can feel what someone else feels really isn't true. You don't feel what the other person feels. You're basically guessing based on your experiences, and you're trying to like approximate what it must be like, and how you're trying to imagine what they're feeling. So that's a bit of a slap to the empaths that can say, like, I feel what they're feeling. It's like, screw you. How dare you try and take my feelings away from me and say that you're feeling what I'm feeling? You have no idea what I'm feeling. Get the hell out of here with that. And you're stepping over boundaries by doing that, but despite this trespass, there'll always be a boundary because of translation and perception. Unless things are really getting bad, then you'll be, like disordered, because then you'll be like enmeshing and taking place like shared identities, and that's very unhealthy. So that's a separate kind of conversation of extreme disordered behavior. We should already be a bit familiar with that. So back into like narcissistic topics of trying to erase identities and exchange one life for another and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so let's move on a bit. So we can see here, therefore, it becomes a fine line of trying to encourage someone and giving them inspiration, trying to help improve their quality of life, and then just totally railroading them, especially if they seem discontent with the way things are currently and not really showing any signs of being able to change. So do not feel bad for wanting to help other people here. And your help can go towards unlocking and allowing them to access their potential, whatever that means for them. And that's actually quite a privileged opportunity to have, and where really your help is most needed. You don't open the door. you let them open the door. The most you really do is just kind of like point out, hey, there's a door behind you that if you just turn around and look, you would see it. There's the handle. And to illustrate, to emphasize even more why it is still important to encourage people, don't shy away from it, is because, for example, like if I were to listen to the so-called experts when it came to my kid growing up, she wouldn't be talking and she would still be in diapers. In her younger years, that was what the experts had told me, is that she's not going to talk and she will be in diapers forever. And I didn't want to accept that. And I thought, no way is that going to be a life for her. So I intervened. And now I can't shut her mouth up. No, she talks, and her communication, she's come a long way. So essentially, what really is the good way of being a teacher, I believe anyway, is, and it depends on your sort of devotion to this person, how much of a commitment and energy you want to invest in them, because there'll come a point where, depending on the situation, are they receptive to it, or are they wasting your time? Are they trying to cling on to you? That's the sort of point where you'd have to like cut them off and let them go, as dire and heartbreaking as that may be. It might seem a little bit what's the opposite of compassionate, like unsympathetic or whatever, but sometimes that is the best way of helping is to not help. But depending anyway, like on your sort of devotion to this person, you kind of help them with baby steps, just like parent, child, baby walking. You start off with the baby steps, and it's much more gentle, it's more doable, it builds up the confidence gradually. And in a way, this is how I approach my teachings here, or my streams or whatever, is gradually building up gradually building up, so that one day when I sense that people are ready, we can really do the deep dives, the deep dives, because you have to be prepared for that. And so a teacher or a parent must be able to gauge, and that's where the discernment comes back in, so that you can gauge the students' awareness and their abilities, and whether or not they can cope with what it is you're trying to give to them, which essentially is information or data, however you want to pronounce it. Too much data will cause analysis paralysis. You overwhelm them. And so with all of this, there'll be, in a way, lessons for the teacher, that they have to have patience. Patience is a virtue. To be a parent, you must be patient. But at some point, it becomes a choice for you of how much are you willing to stand by and watch, because it can be painful to witness someone struggling to such an extent, and it seems as though either maybe you aren't the right person they need to be getting advice from, maybe they need someone else or whatever, but to see them struggle, is you can see that they're in agony. And if you do have any compassion, you will also feel at least sorry for them, a bit of you'll also hurt by it. But when it comes to them now making choices for themselves, once your guidance and advice, and that they've received it, it's gone into their head, this is where your expectations need to stop, and you need to let them go and allow them the space. Like, if I use my kid as an example again, like once she's toilet trained, it's like, good, right, I don't need to keep wiping your backside anymore, you know. And what better way to show someone you believe in them and have faith and confidence, and to let them run for themselves by you stepping back. And you'll know that when there's a shift in when a shift in attitude takes place in them, when they actually turn to you and signal in some manner that they don't actually need your help anymore. You know, you might take that as a bit of a slight because you don't feel needed anymore, but it's actually in a way a reassurance and a good sign that this person you're trying to help believes in themselves. And that's one of the biggest steps, first steps, one of the biggest baby steps they're going to take is, first of all, believe in yourself, have the self-esteem. That will see you through whatever challenges you may face. You know, but if you do feel shunned, you're no longer needed, and you're upset by that, then it kind of points to maybe you have some issues of your own that need addressing. So it shouldn't upset you. It should make you proud, is what I'm saying, to see someone take their life, take control of themselves, and go with it. That should be inspired as much as you might have inspired them, but to see them actually put it into action is a true reward in a way. Not that it's something owed to you, but it's very inspirational. So anyway, I believe that's the sort of the healthy way, healthier format, teaching and parenting and mentoring and passing on experiences, something like that. Now, let me highlight a little bit more on the cautionary side of things, because when we're aware of it, then we can be mindful, and then we can turn this into a more positive. We can redirect it into a more positive way. So it shouldn't be hard to imagine if you're constantly browbeating, nagging, you know, constantly keeping on at them, then what is it? What kind of message are you telling them? You're saying to them that I don't have faith in your ability, which is kind of counterintuitive to your message of trying to tell them that they can make improvements. And this includes like heavily criticizing. So one way you could look at this is think about the kind of wording, the structure of your language, and the attitude that's attached to the criticism. So you could, one way is like frowning and saying, this is who you are, and I don't like it. You know, you're a failure. You F up all the time, and I don't like it. I don't approve you. I don't accept you. That's one way of criticizing someone. Very harsh. Imagine how that's going to work, how they'll feel. And another way is to say something like, hey, I see this thing that you can improve upon if you wanted to. And we would call this constructive criticism. So you can see how they're both in the category of criticizing, but one is condemning, whereas the other one is more constructive. And for the person you're trying to help, you know, they're reading the subtext that's taking place. Like, am I being accepted, or am I being trusted? Am I being empowered or disempowered? And by doing this, because you see with the two kind of statements, one of them is combining their behavior with their identity, whereas the constructive criticism helps to separate their behavior from their identity. You know, do you see that nuance there? It's with especially with the constructive criticism, it's not that I don't like you, it's that this behavior I see can be improved. Whereas the first one, where it's like, I don't like what I see, and I don't like it, and I don't like you, I don't accept it. You can see how that's combining the behavior and the identity. And when you're able to separate the behavior and identity thing, then that can help go towards preventing things like learned helplessness from forming. That's another kind of area of concern or potential concern, where if you're not too mindful of, could end up happening. You browbeat someone down so hard that now you've debilitated them. And in response, instead of you trying to impart words of wisdom, you've just taught them how to develop learned helplessness, the belief of, I can't do anything. To make matters a little bit more convoluted, if they are struggling with other issues, which you might not be aware of, your encouragement could drop them into a world of despair. Never mind reaching potential, which at this point is unrealistic, but they're just struggling, trying to just get by day by day. Now, when these underlying issues are addressed, and unfortunately, you might not know what those underlying issues are, especially if they haven't told you about them, but if you sort of factor it in that there might be other things afoot, but in any case, if these underlying issues are addressed and the self-esteem starts to increase, then potential becomes attainable. And there will be a natural pull towards it because it is now a realistic possibility. So for potential to take place, the groundwork needs to be in order first and stabilized. You can't reach for the stars if there is no stable platform to launch from. And then there's a few other little kind of little niggles where if you're not too careful, if you're someone who likes to set the bar of expectations and you constantly keep raising it, out to what end? And an example I could think of maybe is like, imagine encouraging someone who is trying to do weightlifting to reach a target, and you keep saying to them, push more, and push more. Well, look at how many athletes have pushed themselves to death or severe injury. They pushed it too hard. Like, is it Ronnie Coleman? He's now in a wheelchair. He's got metal plates in his spine, heart problems. Now, he might not complain, and he might say he'll do it all over, he'll do it again. But it's just a reminder that sometimes being enough is perfectly okay. That comes back to the individual who you're trying to help. How far do they want to go with it? Where is their level of contentment? And if you remind yourself what it is that they want instead of perhaps what you want for them, then this shouldn't really be a problem. So we're pretty much towards the end. I've got my closing bit now. So the sort of takeaway from this is that if you're given advice, consider who it is you're talking to, where they're at with their understanding, what is it they want, and hopefully this discussion can help clarify that. Especially if that person we're describing is you, like you're the young person, you're the child here, and you're not too sure what it is you're wanting, and you're hearing all this stuff being told to you, and it makes you feel like you're being pulled apart. Consider what it is you need in order to bridge this gap in communication. And it should go without saying, that means you need to be responsible with your words. Now, this sort of conversation is I think, I'm not too sure, but I think it's more to do really with a heart and spirit, more so than of the mind, because it is the heart that has to deal with the pain, and to grow and to change your life in such a way is in the realm of the emotional landscape, more so than the logical one, I believe. So there's going to be a lot of pain, fears, anxiety, self-love, all that good stuff. Now, to undermine everything I've just said in a way, so I think this topic, with trying to dissect it, starts to become a problem in of itself. We can see how logically we can cause a paralysis here, where it's like, well, how can I help without interfering? It's sort of a contradiction. Like, I have to sort of project and impose if there's going to be a change, because otherwise, if you just leave them be, then what kind of catalyst is going to cause this change? Because otherwise they would have done it for themselves in the first place. The sheer fact that I'm here trying to give them advice indicates that they need it, and here's Billy saying to sort of back off a little bit. So I think this dissection, anyway, this topic can be a bit problematic, but as a general kind of gist is just to remember that the person who you're dealing with is just as validated as the person you're hoping that you envision them becoming. I mean, we can all do with support and encouragement, and to know you have such friends who want to see you thrive more so for your sake than theirs is a true blessing, and it's a very humanitarian thing taking place, and that can't be understated. That is a very to know you have people who, even though they may step over boundaries, even though maybe they're a bit intrusive or something like that, or they're not very their style isn't tailored exactly for your needs, it isn't configured or whatever, how in appropriate way. The sheer fact that you've got people who are trying to watch your back and don't want to see you suffer, and they're trying and things like that, is a real true blessing. And on behalf of all of those who do such a thing, I thank you for all that kind of friendship and loyalty and compassion. Is what makes is one of the beautiful things of the human experience. Now, and another point to mention here, which is generally what I'll leave this stream on, is what matters more so than this potential, in a way, because bear in mind, this person might not actually reach the potential. It's out there, it's in the future, so your life might deviate some other course. It's not a guarantee. But what really matters more so than this attaining of potential is the effort in trying to. It's the try. And it's much better, in a way, to know someone for what they've gone through than just to see a certificate at the end, which doesn't really tell you much. The outcomes are not guaranteed, but willpower is what character is built upon. What do you think? There we are, finished. So yeah, I think that's a profound point to make at the end there. It's the journey, it's the willpower, it's the effort, it's someone who is willing to try. That matters, in my mind, far more than whatever potential they are reaching. Bullets is here. JR is here. Falcon is here. MGTOW Outlaw is here. Silver Bullets, D-Man, Eric Zombro, CJ. Who am I missing? Shadrach. Did I say Silver Bullet? I'm just flying through. JM. Great to see Freebird. Great to see you all here. Thank you so much for coming. I hope this stream was helpful. Hope it kind of just a little nuance. I'm not trying to gatekeep how people want to impart their wisdom. I'm just hoping it kind of helps land their message on the mark more effectively. You know how it is. Sometimes you hear things like yada 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 being told to you, yeah, I heard it all before. Don't do this, don't do that, and then you become numb to hearing it. And this is why I put this picture up as well. It's a guy working hard. You know, what's his potential? I don't really know, but I see he's working hard. He's wiping away the sweat, and that tells me a lot more about the person than what the potential is in store for him. I can see just from that he's a hard worker. He's a bit tired. He's put the hours in. I mean, can you see that? He's got a tiny little hammer. Imagine bashing that around all day long. It ain't easy. So yeah. Let's see if there's any particular comments. Oh, we've got a new subscriber here. Thank you very much. If you're not subscribed, by the way, please do. Helps us out. Leave a comment. Helps the algorithm thing. Hit the like, you know, all that good stuff. Okay, so Bullet says, all I want if for the MGTOW community to show us more positive examples of a MGTOW lifestyle. We deserve better. The men here deserve better. That rehashed ideologies, flame and female nature crap. Yeah, and yeah. Sometime maybe that's a bit of a topic for another time. I feel like there's quite a bit I could say about it. We need to sort of understand why is it people, you know, they focus on the negativity, or why is it they focus in. You mentioned flame, so it's not just having a negative thought, but to flame it as well. And it seems that has more value than the positive. So we can I think Bullets, maybe we can have a stream and we can explain this dynamic, this dichotomy of positive versus the negative aspects, and why is it people seem more interested, air quotes interested, in being on the negative stuff, and the positive stuff isn't really. I mean, people talk about it, hey, we would like to see more positive things, and hey, that was a good stream, it was kind of positive, but there doesn't seem to have that kind of oomph behind it, that sort of push. Now, is it a case that there's nothing to be happy about? I don't believe that's the case, but I think there's more to it, which will be enlightening if you're willing to, but it's for us to unpack. And then when we have this is the thing, when we have a better understanding of things we know, of our observations and things we notice, when we understand the mechanisms that are in place, the problems, why are things happening, when we ask these questions and we can discuss it, then we can start to derive, first of all, an understanding, which is fundamental, let alone to then take it a step further and implement changes. You know, some people, for example, Bullets, you're not going to like hearing this, they don't want to be happy. You know, they enjoy the misery. Oh, thank you, Freebird, for that, and you too. just regurgitating the MSM. What's the MSM? Does not impress me. Is that the mantra? Just regurgitating the same sort of talking points. See, when you talk about regurgitation, you're talking like cycles, cyclic behavior, and spinning your wheels, and that can sometimes be the form of a sort of pseudo fake way of addressing issues. You know, it's obviously not really addressing issues. It's just going round and round and round, but that in itself is the goal, is to keep going round and round and round. You know, now the secondary question is sort of like, how many times are you willing to hear the same thing over and over again? And unfortunately, this is where people might start to slip into, I think they call it like a malaise, a sort of slumber. They're kind of hypnotized by it, and they become numb and desensitized, and just like, my brain has melted and now I'm just a pile of goo. I don't even know what's going on anymore. You know, they know they feel sort of crappy inside, but at the same time, it's like, well, I don't know what to do. We'll just go around again, I suppose. So it's kind of, it's a form of sort of learned helplessness. Maybe not quite. It might be a case of sort of depression, but it's in that kind of region of poor coping strategies, and not really having the spark or inspiration to. I mean, what will tend to happen, Kush, here is a crisis. For this to break the cycle, a crisis will have to happen. You know, and then it'll become a even bigger question of like, right, either you do or you die. Which one is it going to be? And then the survival mechanism will take over. You know, close to basically what we would describe as the mortification process, or something similar. CJ, did I mention? I could give you a shout out. Well, here's a shout out for CJ. Yeah. So things like this, when we understand the reasoning behind it, more so, what function does it serve? Why is it we're highlighting this as if no one knows? You know, it's like, come on, everyone knows, and we've seen it over and over again. So what's the point? Is it to inform us of something we don't know? So we already know automatically that there is deeper meaning for the reasoning behind sharing those sort of clips, or like ruminating on it. And we can then surmise, we can explore, like, is this a way of coping? Is it a way of deflecting? Is it a distraction? Is it a way of feeling better about yourself by pointing at someone else and saying, well, look, there's a hoe over there, and that must mean I'm a stud. And you can start to balance out which is more of a likely sort of reasoning of taking place. You know, could it be, hey, if I make fun of someone else, then all my friends cheer me on and I feel better about, so the more I make fun of them, the more I get cheers and applause from my friends and community, then like a validation, my esteem is increasing. You know, it's not a healthy way of going about things, but you start down to have a it's like a little bit like detective work, as to like, so now I see why you're doing it. You kind of need to do it at this point, because if you don't do it, how are you going to feel better about yourself? You know, if you don't do it, now you're going to have to start thinking about, what are you doing with your life? You know, so in a way, those clips is a way of deflecting the responsibility of you having to do things for yourself. You know, if you've got a channel, especially, and you're trying to produce content, well, if you haven't got things to point at and to showcase, well, now you've got a problem because, like, well, what are you going to produce? You know, and that's why I don't share any videos on here, for example, because everything is self-generated. I don't need material from other places, and I just think that's a bit cheap as well. Fear mongering, yeah. Um, Fear mongering is a way of, well, one of the reasons for it. There could be other reasons, obviously, but if I'm already feeling scared and destabilized, anxious, and all this, well, it would, and I feel alone with my suffering, then if I can make you scared as well and make you think like me, then I'm not alone in this. And then we could be together against this, whatever fear that we're using as a bit of a straw man, but as a bit of an excuse. Like we can't do anything in life because X, Y, and Z, because the laws are against us. It's like, really? They went against me when I did my thing. Yeah, but you're an exception. It's like, really? What's so special? No. You just do, like, if you've got the determination, you'll find a way. Don't you worry, you'll find a way. In fact, I'm actually in the process of doing something which is trying to give me some jip. All right, it's accepting that. I'm gonna find a way, and fifth time was the lucky charm, but I can't really divulge much more information than that. But let's just say 4 times I was denied, and I was like, nah, fifth time, I know this ain't the case. I'm gonna no. Anyway, rambling on now. Okay, I'll close it here because we're close to the hour mark, and we can have a general chat another time. So I hope that stream was helpful. I thank you all again for being here, and like, comment, subscribe. I need to shill some more, really, because I always slack and leave that, like, never really self-promote, but share if you'd be so kind. And enjoy the week ahead. I know for you American guys, you've got the 4th of July celebrations, so I hope that goes well, and all the best for that. And salute and thank you to the men who had and whatever women as well, but for the efforts and the patriotism, and I'm not sure what kind of else sort of things you say on those sort of occasions, but those hardworking, brave, sacrificing, diligent, people with backbones, and who fought for their country, fought for their rights, and did what they felt was right, and helped keep your nation together and things like that. The world wouldn't be, well, the world has changed a lot, but I suppose the world would have gone off a cliff a lot sooner if it wasn't for them. So thank you. Salute to one and all. We're out of here.